Welcome back to the second part of the Knights of the Kitchen Table with the Time Warp Trio. Did you decide? Do you think there really were giants and dragons living during that time period? Well, Jon Scieszka certainly thinks so. Let's continue. Chapter 6. Now, you've probably read about giants in fairy tales, and you've probably seen giants in comic books and cartoons, but you haven't really experienced giants until you've met one up close and personal. And once you've done that, believe me, you would be perfectly happy to never, ever meet another one. I knew giants were big, but I had no idea they were so disgusting. We stood on one side of the castle moat with King Arthur, Merlin, and the Knights of the Round Table, and Bleob stood on the other. He was a terrifying sight and an even more terrifying smell. He towered at least 20 feet, wore no clothes except 2 bloody ox hides tied around his waist, and hid the largest and ugliest face I had ever seen behind a crazy mess of black hair. Rotten bits of meat and bone, tree branches and giant drool and cow manure drew a cloud of flies all around his beard. If the sight of Bleob wasn't enough to make you cry, the smell of him definitely was. And for the first time in my life, I was speechless and a bit dizzy. "Make haste with the magic," said Merlin. "The foul air doth dull the senses." Sam nudged me and handed me a little stick he had split halfway down the middle. He and Fred had already clamped their noses with Sam's homemade clothespins, so I quickly did the same. "Huddo, Mr. Giant," I said, talking through my plug nose. "How can we help you?" And do you know what he answered? Of course you don't, because you weren't there. Well, I'll tell you the truth. He belched. A long, loud, wet, noisy, and totally disgusting burp. Sir Percival and 3 knights closest to him raised their shields, but it was too late, and they took the full force of that awful blast. All 4 of them fainted dead away. There is Bleob in his disgustingness. "Give Bleob 3 fair damsels to eat now, or Bleob smash castle," said you-know-who. And I almost hate to tell you what he did next. Let's just say that when he snorted, he knocked down 2 more knights with 1 blow, and he didn't use a Kleenex. Merlin gave us the hurry-up eye, and I figured there was no way to stop this monster and was just about to yell, "Every man for himself and run," when Sam stepped forward. "Now, just a minute, Mr. Bleob," said Sam, adjusting his glasses. "You can't go around treating Knights of the Round Table like that." He pointed to the pile of knights covered with green giant slime. "We are 3 very powerful magicians who could wipe the floor with you if we wanted, but we're in a good mood today. So we've decided to give you a chance to have your wish come true. Right, fellow magicians?" Fred and I looked at Sam, each other, and back at Sam again. We didn't have the faintest idea what he was talking about. Bleob looked just as confused as we are. "Right," we said. "Since you fairy tale giants are always asking people riddles, we decided to give you a chance to save your miserable skin by answering our riddle. If you answer the riddle, you can eat your fill of fair damsels. And if you can't answer the riddle, you have to leave and never return, okay?" Bleob answered in a way too rude to describe. We grabbed our stick clothespins and ducked, and 10 more brave knights fell like bowling pins, victim of gas warfare. "I'll take that to mean yes," said Sam. "So, for all the marbles, why did the giant wear red suspenders?" "Why did giant wear red suspenders?" Bleob repeated slowly to himself. He raised an arm to scratch his head and unleashed a storm of flies and a poisonous whirlwind of armpit odor that struck down another 5 knights. Because red was Giant's favorite color? Buzz! Wrong, said Sam. He wore red suspenders to hold up his pants. You lose. Goodbye. Bleob shook his head and scratched it again. 2 fish heads and 1 rotten apple core fell out. Everyone held their breath. Bleob turned to go. Fred and I clapped Sam on the back. We were about to go Raz Merlin when we heard the awful sound. It was another bone-rattling, teeth-chattering giant burp. Duh! Hey, wait a minute, you trick Bleob. Giants know wear suspenders. The angry giant turned and stomped back to us. Even the trees shook. Bleob not like little people what trick him. Bleob crushes little peoples that trick him. Bleob stepped over the moat like it was a puddle. He raised 1 foot, which I won't even describe because it would spoil your appetite for a week, to crush us all. Chapter 7. We all ran for the castle. All of us, that is, except for Sam. Sir Sam the Unusual stood there with his arms folded over his chest, not moving an inch. Run for it, Sam, yelled Fred. The huge, dirty foot started coming down. He's finally lost his mind, I said. All of those bad jokes and riddles of his have finally ate his brain. Sam checked his fingernails and said, well, I guess the dragon was right. I should have believed what he told me about giants. What is Sam saying? He's actually talking to the giant again? The monster foot stopped in midair. 1 black and muddy big toe just inches from Sam's head. Ooh, how disgusting. What dragons say about giants? Oh, it's really not very nice. I don't think I should repeat it. Bleob stepped back. He got down on his hands and knees. Tell Bleob what dragon says about giants. Sam leaned forward and spoke in a loud whisper. Don't tell him I told you, but he said dragons are big weaklings. No. Yes. And he said dragons are really just giant sissies who can only smash little tiny things like people. No. I'm not kidding. He said if you ever fought someone your own size like a dragon, you would get your butt kicked. No! Roared Bleob 1 more time, and then he picked up 2 boulders, each as big as a car, and ground them to gravel with his bare hands. Giants stronger than anything, crush dragons just like that. Sam winked at us and jerked his head toward the other side of the castle. Why is he twitching? Asked Fred. Show Bleob dragon. Bleob show you how giant fight. Show you a dragon, huh? Said Sam, jerking his head again. Then I got what Sam wanted us to do. The dragon, Sir Sam, I yelled. The dragon is approaching from the west. Bleob stood up, scratched his head, and burped. He didn't seem to know quite what to do. Well, what do you know, said Sam. This must be your lucky day. There is a dragon right on the other side of the castle, and here's your chance to show a dragon what a giant can do. Sam's idea sunk slowly into Bleob's thick skull. That good idea, little man. Bleob show dragon what giant can do. And he charged off around the corner of the castle, knocking 3 trees and 2 huts flat and shaking the ground for 5 miles in every direction. Everyone, still standing, followed Bleob, but not too closely, around the castle, just in time to see Smog the dragon gliding in for a landing. He was truly a terrible sight. Big, ugly green head, trailing wisp of smoke, shimmering metal scales, huge leather wings, coiling snake body, and iron claws. Dragons are for real. Just as Smog touched down, Bleob smashed into him. Sissy, he belched, and then he clamped his long yellow teeth on the dragon's snout. Smog dug his iron claws into Bleob's leg and thrashed his spiked tail, and the two of them twisted in such a cloud of broken trees and flying earth that we couldn't see a thing. We did hear how it happened, though. Bleob belched, and Smog flamed. And you know when giant gas meets dragon flame, what do you think's gonna happen? You're right! A huge explosion bigger than 4 4th of Julys knocked us all off our feet and rocked the entire kingdom. Huzzah! Yelled King Arthur and his sitting knights. What did he say? Asked Sam with a smile. That's hooray, Sir Sam. Nice magic work. We ducked under a castle arch to dodge the pieces of fried giant and dragon meat raining down. Thou hast saved Camelot and the honor of the Round Table, said King Arthur. Ask anything in my power and it is yours. A giant toenail fell nearby with a thud. How about getting us back home, said Sam. The last few small pieces splattered down outside in a gentle rain. Fred and I nodded, wondering if we would ever see home sweet, normal, peaceful home again. Chapter 8. Keep your eye on the ball, yelled Fred. Choke up a little, follow through, meet the ball. Don't try to kill it, just meet the ball. Ready? The stable boy looked completely confused, but he nodded yes, and gripped Fred's oak stick in a pretty good imitation of a batting stance. Fred stood on a mound at the bottom of a tall, dark stone tower connected to the castle wall. Okay, here's the pitch. Fred lobbed our homemade baseball gently toward home plate. The stable boy swung as hard as he could and missed it by a mile. I caught the ball and Sam yelled, "Strike 3! You're out!" And all the stable boys cheered and began racing around the bases and yelling. 1 home run, Babe Ruth, Detroit Tigers, Bo Nose. Fred walked off the mound and met us at home plate. Do you think I didn't explain enough? Me thinks maybe you explained too much, Sir Fred, said Sam. The guys kept circling the bases, jumping and yelling as they crossed home plate. Full count, infield fly, suicide squeeze. Oh man, said Fred, this is never going to work. We have got to get out of here. This is like the Stone Age. Those guys at the banquet last night hadn't even heard of TV. Can you imagine? Gosh, what a surprise, I said, considering that TV won't be invented for another 1,000 years or so. 1,000 years? I can't live without TV for 1,000 years, said Fred. And did you get a whiff of those people at the banquet? Said Sam. I don't think the shower's been invented yet either. I don't know, I said. I think the smell might have been coming from the food. The stable boys slowed down and sat on the grass around us. 9th inning? Ball 4? Kill the ump? That's it, guys. Game over, said Fred. Sam looked at the castle walls around us. No TV, no cheeseburgers. We are 3 20th century guys, time-warped into the Middle Ages. Score, Squires of the Round Table, 28. Time-warp trio, a big that's 0. 0, 0, 0. Hey, but I like the name, the Time Warp Trio. Remind me to remember it if we ever get out of here alive. Speaking of which, said Fred, how do we get out of here? I tossed our leather ball up and down. If somebody had just let me read my magic book, I might know. Oh, magic book, schmagic book, said Fred. I barely touched your stupid book, and don't tell me we got here by magic. That only happens in dorky books. Sam looked around again. The stable boys looked around at him. But if we did get here by magic, wouldn't we be better getting back home the same way? Exactly, I said. So all we have to do is to find someone who knows magic. I wonder who that might be. "Ah, forget that magic jazz," said Fred. "King Arthur said he'd make us knights of the Round Table tonight. Let's do something useful while the sun is up. Joe, you pitch, I'll hit. And tomorrow we'll explain how TV works." Sam rolled his eyes. I walked out to the mound. Birds tweeted, the sun shone warmly. It was actually rather nice in Camelot, but Fred was right. We had to get out of the Middle Ages before we went 20th century crazy. Sam crouched behind the plate. "Hum it, Joe." I wound up and fired my best fastball down the middle. Fred swung his oak bat and crushed it. The leather ball cleared the wall, still rising, going, and then it disappeared through one of the tiny windows in the tall, dark tower. We heard the crash of breaking glass. 3 quick explosions rocked the tower. Red, blue, and yellow flames spit out of the tower windows. The flames circled the tower, forming a cloud and rained purple snakes, white stars, red dragons, and 100 different weird and glowing shapes that dissolved as they hit the ground. "Magic?" gasped Sam. "I think we found it." Then we heard, "Who dares disturb my work?" Who have they found in the tower? Oh, yes, it's Merlin. "Merlin," gasped the stable boys, and they were gone. "Omnia uba sub ubi," boomed the voice again. "Show yourselves, demons of destruction, and feel the wrath of Merlin." The freaky cloud began to disappear. Fred, Sam, and I looked at each other. We knew instantly what we had to do. We ran! Chapter 9. Later that evening, Fred, Sam, and I knelt before King Arthur in the great hall. He couldn't get us home, so he figured the least he could do was to make us knights of the Round Table. King Arthur tapped each of us on the shoulders with the flat of his sword, Excalibur. Queen Guinevere and the knights looked on. "I hereby dub thee Knights of the Round Table. Rise, Sir Fred the Awesome. Rise, Sir Sam the Unusual. Rise, Sir Joe the Magnificent." The assembled knights raised their swords and cheers. "Bring our newest knights their armor." 3 squires staggered forward loaded with swords, shields, and a coat of mail for each of us. Fred's eyes lit up. Armor? Swords? This Middle Ages stuff might be okay after all. Then Merlin appeared. He was wearing his robe, whispering in King Arthur's ear, and holding our leather baseball. "Oh no, we're sunk now," said Sam. "He's history," said Fred. "If he even comes near us, I'll run him through with my new sword." "Don't say anything," I said. "Pretend you never heard of a baseball." King Arthur nodded, and Merlin shuffled up and looked us over with those piercing green eyes of his once more. "E'er since you enchanters arrived," he said, "I couldn't but think that you were of a time or a place I have not seen before." "Nope, and we never heard of baseball before either," said Fred. Sam groaned. "You're a dimwit. Why don't you just have him throw us in the dungeon?" "Shut up for a minute, you guys. Let Mr. Merlin talk. He was, or is, one of the greatest magicians who ever lived." Merlin bowed his thanks to me and continued. "When this leathern sphere magically appeared to me this afternoon, I remembered something. This sphere appears in a very old and a very strange book. Even I know not whence this book came. Perhaps you know something of its secret?" And with that, Merlin produced from his robe a thin blue book, a book such a dark, dark blue that it looked black like the stars in the sky. It had gold stars and moons along the back edge and twisty silver designs on the front and back that look like writing from a long time ago? Before any of us could say a word, Merlin had opened the book to a picture of 3 guys sitting around a kitchen table looking at a baseball. A familiar pale green mist began to swirl around the feet of Merlin, King Arthur, and Queen Guinevere, and everyone in the room oohed and awed, thinking it was another magic trick. Merlin smiled. The mist rose, covering everything. Chapter 10. And Joseph Arthur, if you can just march right outside with that smoke bomb and smoke yourself silly with those stupid magic tricks, because I've had enough. Do you hear me? The mist slowly melted. We were sitting back at the kitchen table as if we had never left. Mom was scooping up another armful of wrapping paper and storming out of the room, muttering, "Joe the Magnificent, my foot. Joe the Brainless is more like it. Joe the totally irresponsible. A fog machine disguised as a book. Why, there ought to be a law. What kind of a gift is that to give to a young boy?" Neither Fred, nor I, nor Sam moved a muscle. No one made a sound until I said, "Merlin?" "Black Knight," answered Fred. "Bleob and Smog," said Sam. The 3 of us looked at each other. We looked at the book in my hand, the baseball on the table, then back at each other. Fred shook his head. "No way. That stuff couldn't be for real." "I'm not so sure," said Sam, wiping the last of the mist off his glasses. And I wasn't so sure myself. Then I put my hand in my pocket. I felt something. I pulled it out. It was a card. A card from an old deck with all sorts of crazy pictures on it. I held it up. "It was Queen Guinevere's magician card," said Sam. "Joe, promise us you're not going to wish for anything else," said Fred. I looked carefully at the twisted silver designs and the patterns of the gold stars and moons on the night black blue book, and for a split second it seemed like I could read what it said. "Oh, I won't," I promised. "Well, not unless I can read the book first. I'm going to read it first, and then we'll see." And that's the end of the Knights of the Kitchen Table, the first in the Time Warp Trio series. Now, Jon Scieszka, which rhymes with fresca, if you have trouble remembering it, has gone on to write quite a number of other books and other series. A series about space called Astronauts, a science series with real science adventures called Frankenstein. So check out some of his books at his website, Jon, spelled Jon, Scieszka, SCIESZKA.com. He has weekly adventures on there. He also has other activities you can do, but he is quite a prolific author. And I think if you've enjoyed this book, you'll enjoy traveling back in time with the Time Warp Trio and to the time of pirates or cowboys, samurais, Egyptian mummies, just to name a few. So enjoy.